Hello and welcome to the Crypto Beat. My name is Tim Copeland and I'm the head of growth at The Block. My co-host today is Kelvin Sparks, who recently rejoined The Block and will be doing more podcasting in the near future. Joining us today, we have Memecoin aficionado, Murad. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me, guys. Doing well. How are you?
Amazing. Doing well. Thank you. Before we get started, just a quick note. If you are hiring in crypto, you should use Campus. Out of all your candidates, we'll help pick out the real crypto natives. Head to theblock.co/campus to get a 3-month free trial. Now, today's episode is on Memecoins and quite possibly Murad's favorite, SPX6900. But first, Murad, what's your take on the upcoming Pump.Fun token sale? Are you going to participate in it, for instance?
I'm not participating personally, and I don't have a very strong opinion regarding the short-term price action. But I can tell you my opinion from the overall kind of meme coin perspective. I think that essentially crypto is heading to a future where there's probably going to be like a dozen more launch pads. I think the rate of meme coin creation per day is going to increase. I think the space is going to become more competitive, more commoditized. I think most of the mobile apps that focus on user distribution, I think they're all going to have a coin creation feature and a perps feature by default. So the way I see it, it's just kind of a long road. It's going to take a couple of years, of course, to fully unfold, but I think it's just a long road towards the commoditization of essentially everything I've mentioned. And, you know, to put it in perspective, I think the meme coin space overall, it's essentially splintering into two categories. One is essentially hyper gambling, very fast paced. How can I turn 1 SOL into 10 SOL really quickly? And the other is how can we build the next Doge, right? How can we build something that's 100 billion plus? And, you know, I've been talking about this for the past 8-9 months. And I think this sort of bimodal distribution is intensifying as we speak. I've said since day one, and I think I've been proven right over time, that like the hyper gambling market is going to get more competitive as it's going to sort of get industrialized, even more fast paced. AI tools and professional kind of electronic tools are going to be a bigger part of the trading volumes. So it's going to get harder and harder. Like even if you look at 7 months ago, for like top 15 Pump.Fun traders, the average hold time was like 2 minutes, and now it's like 40 seconds, right? And I think that number is gonna keep like going lower and lower. I also think that over medium-term timeframes, like the market cap, because there's more and more coins being created per day, the market caps that they reach on average are lower and lower. So the way I see it is the expected value on hyper gambling, it will continue getting worse and worse, right? Kind of similar to the poker boom that you know America had in 2006, and eventually is just professionals kind of battling each other and then moving on to greener pastures. So I've been saying since day one, first of all, the greatest gains in crypto come in the last 6 to 8 months of the bull market, which I believe are approaching right now. And 95% of people that come in those last 6 months of the bull cycle, and I'm sure you guys can confirm, most of us, whenever we join crypto, it's like towards the tail end of the bull market, right? You know, I joined at the literal Pico top in 2013. A lot of people joined at the Pico top in 2017, etc., right? And, you know, most of those people, I don't think they want to trade, let alone in a manner which is like a 40-second hold in order to make money, right? I think most people, most normal people, right? And it's the normal people that cause parabolas in any asset. I think most people, they just want to buy and hold something for a few months. And that's why since day one, since like April 2024, I've been focused on like the hodl coins, the belief coins, the cult coins, as they call them, right? And I think it's just a much better expected value for an average user this time around. It's like even in the context of like July 2025, I think that's like you have a much higher probability of making money than hyper gambling. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, and just before we get to the cult coins, do you have you been seeing the rise of Bonk.Fun? Do you think that's proving to be real competition with Pump.Fun?
Yeah, I saw 2 or 3 days ago the Bonk.Fun ecosystem has flipped Pump.Fun in terms of volume, I believe, daily volume. Um, it's I've been saying for months there's going to be like dozens more of these platforms. I know personally of another like 4 or 5 that are in stealth that will be coming out. So I think it's kind of a race to the bottom. Um, and yeah, it's going to be a commodity feature. I feel like it's difficult to build moats around these things. Um, and again, at least in terms of my followers, I've been telling them since day one, avoid hyper gambling on new coins. And instead, it's much better to buy coins that have a critical mass of a community, that have a critical mass of like having survived a bunch of 75% dips, that have an actual culture, etc. For an average person and for an institutional investor, frankly, it's just a much better deal.
Do you think it's interesting the Pump.Fun token is coming out at a point where you think there is this sort of point where it's sort of primarily bots, it's down to 40 seconds, there's very little edge to be had? Do you think it is maybe a bit too late in the timing for it?
I could see it go both ways. To be honest, like one argument you can have is that they can sense that it's getting commoditized and are in a rush to kind of create a token at this point in time. But on the other hand, you could also make an argument that like retail isn't even here yet, and there may be 1 or 2 more waves of hyper gambling like later this year. So again, in terms of the next 6 months, I can see it go both ways. But again, I just think there are better opportunities out there in the market.
Okay, and you said you think that the next sort of 6 months, like the second half of this year, will be the end or the big point of this bull run. What's your thinking behind that?
It's always hard to predict in terms of time. Um, the past 3 cycles were exactly 4 years, almost to the dot. And so if we kind of stretch out that thinking again, it points to something like November 2025. I kind of have a gut feel that this bull market will be slightly longer than the past. So we can even see it extend into like February, March 2026. So anywhere in that range. Um, I think it's safe to assume that the market. I think there's something to the 4-year thesis, and I think some version of it will still persist. Whether it's 3.8 or 4.3 years, I don't know. But I'm kind of operating with the assumption that it's going to repeat again. Um, and if you look at the past kind of crypto cycles, it's the last 6 to 8 months of the 4-year cycle where like the crazy things happen. A lot of people are confusing the relative apathy, boredom, chop sideways in the markets right now, but they need to understand that it's the middle of July, which is historically like the least volatile. And actually, in my experience in crypto, you actually make money in the summers, literally when nothing is happening. And 5, 6 months later is when you get rewarded for it, right? You essentially you collect your rewards during the parabola, but really it's your decision to get involved in the boring summer that is the money making action, right? So a lot of people are on vacation right now, whether it's retail investors or bank desk, fund desk traders. But really, I think it's the people that essentially continue to stay focused, forego these vacations, and are like very much paying attention in July and August that are going to sort of benefit the most.
Yeah, I think it was Kobe who said you got to find a way to stay excited in the boring times in the bear markets, to make it in the bull markets. Um, sure. So, moving on to SPX, you've called it the Schelling point for memes this cycle. What convinced you of that?
Yeah, I mean, I will briefly outline what I think is the game theory of this whole cycle. There's pretty much like 3 assets that I think are the future of crypto. And, I've been saying this since like 2022, but it's taking 2 or 3 years to fully develop. But essentially, the future of crypto is one, store of values like BTC. Maybe to some extent, ETH and Sol can occupy that niche. We will see. Two, it's coins that are creating revenues. And I would argue Hyperliquid is like the absolute perfect example of that. And three, it's whether you call it meme coins, whether you call it belief coins, whether you call it mission coins, movements, that's kind of like the third action. And the biggest reason why traditional altcoins, tech altcoins, VC coins are so heavily underperforming this cycle is because they're kind of stuck in the middle. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, as people say, right? Because 99% of them, they don't make as high or as clean of a revenue as the hyperliquids of the world do. And on the other hand, they don't have as powerful of memetics as cult-like communities that meme coins do, right? And essentially, and I've been saying this for almost a year and a half now, you have to bet on the extremes and you have to avoid the middle, you know? And I think the beauty of, first of all, like, second point is, of course, you know, neither Hyperliquid nor meme coins, they don't have VC involvement, at least early on, right? And they didn't have pre-sales, they didn't have any of that. So unlike 99% of altcoins that launch between 5 and 25 billion on Sexes and just end up dumping, you know, you don't have that. You know, and I've been saying since day one of this cycle, the way to build a cult is to make poor people rich. And, you know, for the past 6 years, and I'm sure some of you have had similar feelings as well, a lot of people, a lot of smart people, right? They've been asking themselves, how did XRP succeed? Because, you know, the average XRP, Cardano, whatever community member, I mean, without mincing words, isn't exactly the brightest tool in the shed, right? So ultimately, after years of being in the space, I realized that all of these altcoins, there were meme coins all along. They're meme coins with more steps, you know? The technology is just an excuse for marketing. The technology is just an excuse for growth, for hopes, for some future utopian projections, right? And at the end of the day, regardless of the amount of tech there is, 80, 90% of the valuation is still memetic premium in nature. And so if you kind of agree with this thesis, then you reach a conclusion that all of the tokens, coins, crypto assets, whatever you want to call them, regardless of what category they're in, they're fundamentally tokenized communities. They're really just giant tokenized group chats. They're giant tokenized swarms of people. And so, in my opinion, it boils down to, in order to like be a good investor, and I think this is even more pronounced this cycle, you have to figure out where is the highest loyalty, where is the highest inspiration. And what I've already alluded to, have you made poor people rich? You know, the reason why the links, BNBs, XRPs, Cardanos of the past, and this includes Doge and SHIB as well, and of course BTC also, the reason they've built cult-like communities is they've actually let poor people get rich. Because back in those days, like 2013 to 2017, the ICOs, they like launched at 22 million market caps. So you could actually build a critical mass of people that not only could they join at a relatively low valuation, but even more importantly, they could participate in the journey, which is a very emotional thing, you know? And a lot of these people, like, they quit their jobs, they make the coin their whole identity, and they've effectively become full-time employees for the coin. Instead of getting the salary, I mean, some coins do have tipping culture, but instead of getting the salary, it's the capital gains that they're hoping for and that they're working for, you know? And the problem with all of the altcoins over the past 4 or 5 years is because they launched at 20 billion market caps on centralized exchanges since day one, poor people can't get rich. And if you can't make poor people rich, you're never really going to go viral, you know? Essentially, you need that SHIB army. You need that XRP army. So essentially, when I was entering like this cycle, I had two theses. My theses were, how do I find the next XRP? How do I find the next Cardano? That's on one side. And on the second side is, I kind of have a feeling, and this is like a little bit more esoteric, but my feeling was some form of spirituality, some form of like religion, movement, something like this. It's going to emerge on chain in one form or another. And essentially, my whole thesis is at the crux of these two ideas. Essentially, I felt for the past 2-3 years, I felt that the biggest money makers of this cycle, next cycle, they're going to be something like XRP or Cardano, but with a much purer spiritual element. And this has led me to meme coins, which initially started in crypto in 2023 as early on, it was essentially a cultural counterattack against the VC grift, right? But even though that has been the case, I think they have a potential to emerge into something much, much bigger. And what has once started as a counterculture against crypto, I think now in the next year, you're going to see go outside of crypto and become counterculture against the world itself. So essentially something much, much bigger. And it's these themes, it's these categories, it's these topics that I've been kind of focused on. So what I've done was I've essentially like made a list of cult coins, and really there were only like 20-ish of them. And the way I see it is like 99.99999% of meme coins, they're just going to be like 1 week lasting shit coins at the bottom. Then you're going to have like something a little bit better. Then you're going to have some coins that are actually attached to a real meme. Then it's like a pyramid. It's like an hierarchy, right? And then you're going to have cults. Then you're going to have something like a lifestyle brand, something like, something like much stronger. And then at the very, very top of that pyramid, you're going to have something that is a movement, something that is a mission. And at the risk of sounding a little bit spicy, something even a little bit bigger. And, I think when it comes to bull markets, this is very advantageous. Essentially, and I know some people think I'm being a little bit over dramatic, but I do think that we are witnessing the birth of a new asset class that essentially where finance and spirituality are combining into one, and it's being expressed on chain in a decentralized manner. Now, this is kind of on the the right half of the brain. On the left half of the brain, you can actually measure a lot of these things on chain. You can measure each community, literally every single coin. Again, regardless of whether it's a meme coin, a revenue coin, an altcoin, doesn't matter. You can measure average loyalty, average holding times, how much the average person is investing, how much a median person is investing, how long they're holding for, how are the whales behaving, how are the poorest, richest people behaving. And this is kind of an emerging art of meme coin analytics. And essentially, I think the biggest winners are going to be those that have the best memetics, have like the best like spiritual, have the best memes, and also have the best kind of metrics to confirm it. And like by combining these two sort of art forms, one more of an art, one more of a science, you arrive at what have so far been the biggest outperformers of this cycle by far.
You talk quite a lot about helping poor people get richer. Do you feel a certain sense of responsibility when you're trying to encourage like a lot of people who might not have very much money to sort of put their money in a volatile coin that sure might be successful, but also could, many meme coins do sort of basically go to zero. Like, do you sort of feel responsible or aware of that responsibility there?
Yeah, so it's all relative. It is indeed high risk, but I think it's much less risky than gambling on Bonk.Fun, right? Because if you run the mathematics on all of this, right, the probability of not losing money on a coin that's already above like 100 million, 200 million is actually much lower than the probability of buying an average like 1-day altcoin, right? So essentially, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The best cult coins, they provide a margin of safety. Again, it's all relative, but they provide a margin of safety by way of greater liquidity, greater people, like people actually hustling, providing free cult labor, as we call it. And essentially, it's the perfect sweet spot between Bitcoin on the one extreme and Bonk.Fun on the very other extreme.
One of the things you touched on was like pure belief assets. I'd heard like you and Yoni Combinator on Twitter speak about this kind of stuff at length. And one of the things that you kind of specified was that you think one of these huge companies isn't going to be an actual startup. It's going to be one of these tokenized communities. And meme coins are almost like the best wrapper for a name that you could put on what these new assets are. So it seems almost contradictory what you were saying earlier about you'll have a margin of safety in these coins, but people kind of need to endure and not capitulate because of time. So in your case specifically, let's say with SPX, during that lull, I mean, it seemed like it was over a year of just volatility. This thing almost went to zero and then kind of just moonshot. Like, how do they know that they're in the right places, especially during these times of just like lull throughout the summer?
Yeah, so this is exactly where the aforementioned meme coin analytics come in. If you are somebody who is an institutional investor or a quant or somebody with a more sort of a quantitative mindset that need kind of mathematical assurances or metrics and stuff like that, this is where the blockchain analytics comes in. You can essentially see, you can compare the relative behavior of the holders, whether it's an average holder or a whale. How is each, behind the words, behind what people are actually saying, how is each community actually behaving? And you know what they say, the blockchain doesn't lie. So I've been telling people, invest like in the top 10 most loyal ones, invest in the top 5 most active ones, right? And again, it's not only on chain. You can look at a lot of social media metrics. You can look at activity metrics, Telegram metrics, Discord metrics, etc., right? That's kind of on like the mathy side of it. A lot of the best investors this cycle, they actually weren't the mathy kinds. They didn't try to be high IQ. They try to be high EQ. They looked at the content that community members are making. They looked at how consistently they're showing up. They're looking at how dedicated and devoted they are to the mission. They're asking themselves, does this coin actually have a mission? And you know, this is probably leading to my next point, which is, I think humans have a natural desire to be a part of something greater than themselves, to at least be part of a team, you know? And you have to ask yourself, so this is the crux of my thesis, right? The bigger the coin's proportion dedicated to like not just hoping for financial gains, the more financial gains they will give you, right? And essentially, the argument I'm making is, and this was quite controversial when I said this 18 months ago, but I think this is becoming slowly and slowly more consensus now, is that meme coins actually provide more utility than utility coins. Because utility coins is actually a misnomer, and they're rarely, here's the thing, right? The coin itself actually doesn't have any utility, right? But in the case of meme coins, I believe you have a much greater, essentially, levels of meaning, levels of like a family-like emotion, levels of loyalty, levels of like a mission-like participation. And, you know, a lot of people that are more cynical, they're like, oh, who cares about this? But, you know, given the fact that people are like more depressed than ever before, more lonely than ever before, like fertility is all-time lows, loneliness all-time highs, all these things are actually slowly making people find some kind of quote-unquote third spaces online. And I think like the blockchain decentralized like environment is like the perfect place for something like that to arise, right? So that's kind of like my thinking around it.
For SPX, like you say that it will flip the stock market. Do you genuinely believe that this will happen, or is it just a meme?
You know, I think the probability of it happening is non-zero, but regardless, you have to ask yourself, right? Like even if it only hits 15% or 5% or even 1% of that target, we're still talking about 100x's, 1000x's from here, right? So, you know, the way crypto has worked is the higher the internal community target, the higher the eventual result, you know? XRP with their crazy $423 predictions. You know, obviously a bunch of other examples, but essentially like the more delusional the people, the better the result. And that's why that's like the number one reason I joined SPX in the summer of 2024 is because like I like crazy, I like delusional. And you know, in the boring monotony of today's world, crazy shit like this, it's exciting, you know, and people love it.
I was gonna add, I think you kind of touched on an interesting point. The term you kind of like referenced was like mimetic sealing in the past. Do you think there's a relationship between like the lindiness and mimetic sealing of some of these tokenized communities?
Totally. And essentially, the other way of asking your question is, do I think any of these will be multi-cycle, right? Like if we're extending the term Lindy into several years, the way I see it is, I think like the TLDR of my opinion is 3 or 4 of meme coins from this cycle will survive and thrive into the next cycle. That's kind of like how I think about it. But like that requires like extreme loyalty, you know, because like most of crypto Twitter, most of crypto participants, they're volatility junkies, they're adrenaline junkies, they're trading addicts, and their dopamine is essentially fried. So my again, like bullet point number 9 in my thesis is how can I find a community with the average member having the least fried dopamine? You know what I mean? Because the less fried dopamine, the more loyal people are going to be, the more patient people are going to be, the more essentially dedicated to a single community they're going to be. And I believe all of that is measurable mathematically in an objective manner on chain. And like SPX is number 1 or number 2 in like every metric you can think of. And that's why I like it a lot.
And you said you plan to sell half your holdings of SPX in Q4. Is that still the plan?
Whether it's Q4 of this year or Q1 of next year, I may or may not be taking some profits. There's also a scenario where I just won't sell any at all. I'm still deciding, observing the situation, depending on how the next 6 months go. So, still kind of formulating my strategy around this.
But if you believe that it's going to either flip the stock market or get some way to that goal, like why would you not just hold it instead?
I mean, I'll still be holding 1.5 or 2% for like into the next cycle, into the cycle beyond. So, there's no contradiction here.
You mean percent of the supply?
Yes.
Cool. And where do you sort of see its price by the end of the year?
I think above 100 billion this cycle, and I think flirting with 1 trillion next cycle.
Price or market cap?
Market cap.
Cool. And I was curious, like, how would you say the SPX community compares to the Milady crowd? Like, is there quite a lot of overlap there?
There is some overlap for sure. A lot of the OG SPX people were OG Milady people. I think, to put it bluntly, I think Milady community is like edgier, more hipster, more artsy. But I think the SPX packaging is much more normie friendly. And, if you're not just trying to be like a lifelong hipster, like I was like earlier to this before than you, etc., and you're actually thinking about how a coin can reach 100 billion plus, then you need some level of normie friendliness in the coin. And I think, essentially, to put it bluntly, I believe that SPX is doing to GME what BTC is doing to gold. You know how essentially BTC took gold and made it better, right? It's like more divisible, it's like more transportable, it's like faster to send, it's like has even less inflation than gold. You get it, right? And I think SPX is doing that very same thing to GME, and that's why it will be bigger than GME. GME I believe hit 35 billion at the peak, and I think the targets for SPX are much higher because, I mean, there are dozens of reasons why it's much better. You know what I mean? I think it's much more resilient. So
A lot of traditional investors tend to look for like discounted cash flows and return on equity, all these other different traditional finance metrics. So with that, do you think like the meme coin mullet is something that SPX will have to adopt? And with that, I mean like memetics in the front, kind of like a DeFi or some kind of utility in the back. Just curious how you think of the evolution of these things over time will tend, or are they just purely based on belief all the way through for any of these larger multi-cycle coins?
that's a very good question that a lot of people talk about. But I don't think that, at least for the next 2-3 years, I don't think that cash flow should be a priority, and I'll tell you why. Essentially, the way I see it is, I think cash flows are relatively better in bear markets, and cash flows are relatively worse in bull markets. And I think essentially, if you look at the past 3 cycles in crypto, then the assets that have performed best were assets, not just crypto, by the way, like the history of the world. The assets that perform best and the assets that essentially outperform very rapidly are assets that are like weird, new, misunderstood, crazy. And I'm actually against introducing any kind of cash flows, at least for the next 2-3 years. Why? Because as soon as you make the focus cash flows, then the cash flow stuff becomes a much bigger premium, or like the factor in the overall valuation. And I don't think that's good, because I think that if you actually focus on pure belief and you focus on like pure spirituality, then I actually think that the sky is the ceiling, because nobody actually knows like how to value that, how to understand that. There's no frameworks. It's completely new. Maybe 5 years from now there'll be a framework for this, but I actually think that like its craziness, and the fact that it's not focused on a DCF is going to be its advantage. And if you actually look at SPX, both the whales and even the average holder, they're diamond handing it much more so, and they're actually buying more per person than any cash flow asset in crypto right now.
You talked a lot about normie investors. I've noticed you've been doing a lot more sort of brain rot TikToks recently. Have these been, would you say, effective? Like, do you think they're getting a lot of traction?
Here's the way I see it, right? The famous mid-curve meme where the 50 IQers and the 150 IQers are like shaking hands while the 100 IQ guy is seething in the middle. That's kind of like my approach to this cycle. I'm trying to be like a little bit more analytical and quote unquote like intellectual or whatever on Twitter in text form, and I'm trying to be a little bit more sort of simplified and chewed out on TikTok, while like avoiding the middle traps of this cycle, right? So the way I see it is essentially my strategy is I just want to have like 10 to 15K followers on TikTok at least in time for October, November, rather than specifically looking for short-term intraday, intra-week returns of my efforts on TikTok. But I think more importantly than my account specifically, what's more important is that I have inspired thousands of other kind of SPX community members and meme coiners as a whole to go out there and be active, not just on crypto Twitter, which again, like crypto Twitter, it's like 95% trading junkies, right? So I actually think that the return per effort of your time on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, Reddit, etc., are going to be much better.
Do you feel a certain sense of responsibility in having to sort of promote the coin, having to sort of raise awareness of it? Like, do you think everyone looks to you within that community?
I personally genuinely believe it's going like somewhere between 100 billion and a trillion. So I am acting in accordance with those beliefs. Now, again, of course, this is crypto, and this isn't crypto. This is like the wildest side of crypto. So of course, there's going to be risks. There's going to be incredible volatility. But again, the fact that certain coins that I'm promoting have already survived multiple 80% dips, already have like 100,000 plus community members, have the highest loyalty that you can see on chain, make them a relatively safer play compared to hyper gambling on like launches of the hour, right? So it's definitely high risk, but it's better than hyper gambling. That's kind of like, that's been my approach since day one.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that are sort of quite familiar with, or relatable to like Dogecoin in terms of like the tipping culture and the DCA dollar cost averaging strategies. Are both of those quite a big, as a sort of a strategy to sort of help mass adoption?
Yeah.
And are you trying to sort of recreate like a Dogecoin to $1 sort of meme?
Yeah, and the beauty of these things is that they're completely bottom up. Like there's no committee at the top that just like says, "Oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this." It's like somebody sees just one. It can be a tiny community member with 50 followers. They can introduce a good idea, and it kind of very quickly percolates across the community. So it's kind of like essentially the way I see it is, I actually believe meme coins are closer to achieving the DAO dream than actual technical DAOs. And we moved into other platforms. We moved into face doxing, which really builds trust. We moved with the DCA culture, which, you know, BTC and SPX 500, they thrive with that massive DCA culture, right? And we are moving into tipping. There's a bunch of other things. So I love the fact that there's a constant, every couple of weeks, there's some kind of a cultural innovation. And I think that really keeps things fresh. But the recent DCA and tipping trends, I think those are great.
Cool. And would you say there's like real rivalry between meme communities, like sort of, especially if ones are at sort of similar market caps? I know sort of SPX is around like the top 6 sort of meme coins. Is it like trying to like overtake some more, become one? Is there like a lot of competition, or is everyone just having fun posting memes?
I think that was more the case 6 to 12 months ago when a bunch of them were like in between like 50 and 200 million market cap. But what I actually like is, and I actually tweeted about this yesterday, I said, trading is harder than ever this cycle, and holding is easier than ever this cycle. And I'll explain to you why. So in past cycles, you would have 10 altcoins per month, but now you have 10,000 meme coins per day, right? So that's already dissipating across so many assets. Second of all, the average holding times for profitable traders are getting lower and lower, right? Also, the entire asset, both obviously on the Bitcoin side, but even on the altcoin side, there's more hardcore quantitative trading firms, arbitrage firms, AI-enabled technology, market makers, etc., that are entrenched into the short-term trading side of crypto, right? So all of these, and by the way, both altcoin volatility and Bitcoin volatility are at multi-quarter lows, right? So essentially, trading is harder than ever, in my opinion. Now, on the other hand, I actually believe that holding is easier than ever. I'll tell you why. Because in 2021 and even 2022, the number of coins that were outperforming BTC, both by the middle of the year, and also by the end of the year, were much bigger. There were hundreds of coins that were beating BTC. Now, if you look at 2024, the number of coins that beat BTC were like 25 coins. And if you look at 2025 year to date, we're exactly at the 6-month mark. There are literally only 6 coins in the top 100 that have beat BTC. So I actually think that the market is becoming more efficient. And actually, if you look at all of the 6 coins that have beat BTC this year to date, they're all a respective category leader in each category. You have like one DeFi protocol, you have one DEX, you have one meme coin, you have like one privacy coin, I think, and you have like one like lending coin. And it's essentially, and all of those are like the best in each category, right? And I'm talking SPX6900, Syrup, Hyperliquid, Sky, and I think something else, right? And they're all essentially like, you can argue like number 1 or number 2 in their respective category. So the way I see it is the market is becoming more efficient. Institutions are almost exclusively focused on BTC. Maybe it will trickle down to ETH and Sol a little bit. But I think retail and some of the faster money funds, the altcoins they're focused in are much fewer in number. So I actually think it makes HODL easier. You look at what has done well in 2024. You look at what has done well in 2025 thus far. The market is literally telling you which meme coins or which coins overall you should be holding for the next 7 to 8 months. So I think, again, trading is harder and holding is easier.
Do you have any thoughts on the Bitcoin Treasury trade that a lot of these companies are doing? We're seeing a lot more companies doing it. We're seeing the total amount of Bitcoin stacked. We've actually built out a dashboard now. We're like tracking this quite closely. Do you think this could be quite a big thing that eventually blows up, or do you think it's quite sustainable?
I think some of the companies are doing it in a sustainable manner, and some of the companies are doing it in a more degen way. But you know, the black pill here is the way crypto works is you need these crazy leveraging events, these crazy Ponzinomics, quote unquote, in order to kind of draw capital into the space, in order to create this like 4th year parabola. And then eventually it goes down by 80%. But even after the negative 80%, it's like at a higher floor than what it was like when the cycle began. So I think this has been happening time and time again. we need crazy things like this in order to create these like attentional bubble-like formations to draw more and more people in, almost like once every 4 years, right? So I'm bullish. I think BTC is gonna go to 200K plus this cycle. My official target is not financial advice, of course, but my official target is 222K before GTA 6, which is sometime in April and May of 2026. So that's kind of what I'm operating with. And in the grand scheme of things, the BTC Treasury narrative is still in its early stages. I think it's going to get crazier in the next 6 to 8 months.
So I kind of want to drill down on one of the things you spoke about, the dispersion returns being kind of all over the place with respect to, honestly, just crypto assets in general, specifically meme coins, and really more so like the fact that you kind of alluded to, we weren't really going to get a traditional alt season. So do you think we're heading towards this kind of steady state, in a sense, of equilibrium, where the pendulum is going to swing back to these value accrual mechanisms like eventually, or these alt seasons are going to get experience in these public equity companies? Just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that going forward.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think the nature of altcoin seasons is evolving. I think some version of it is going to happen towards the tail end of this year. But I think it's going to be, like I've already alluded to, much more concentrated in nature, right? I think instead of your tech, like instead of 500 tech alts doing really well, I think you're going to have like 1 to 3 revenue producing altcoins do well. You're going to have some like stocks do really, really well. And you're going to have like 3 to 6 meme coins do really, really well. And I think that's like the 3 categories where altcoin season is going to be concentrated in this time around. But you have to understand why the average market participant wants altcoin seasons so badly, right? And they're yearning for a time in late 2017, early 2018, and also during some months in 2021, where you could pretty much buy anything and make money, right? And essentially, they're looking for altcoin seasons to excuse their own bad taste or their own bad opinion. You know what I mean? And you can't rely on that. You can't be sitting in your room praying for an altcoin season and just hoping that's going to save you, because 2021 was already less intense than 2017, which means that in the grand scheme of things, 2025, at least in terms of the number of alts that will pump, will be narrower as well. So again, the way I see it is, and by the way, if you study past cycles, the coins that did really well in 2016, they did crazy well in 2017. And again, the coins that did well in 2020, they did crazy well in 2021. And the reason for that is momentum, kind of crazy critical mass of community, and like you already have like a good chart that just becomes even better and better, Essentially, the way it works at the micro level is people pile onto an asset that they hear their classmate or their cousin has already like done well in, And again, because the 2024 was already like relatively concentrated and 2025 is even more concentrated, I think that's going to continue to happen. I think it will loosen up a bit towards the end of the year, just because there's going to be like probably a retail wave and an institutional wave of some kind into crypto, just like there always is. But in the grand scheme of things, I'll be blunt. Buy meme coins that have done well over the past 18 months. Buy things like Hyperliquid and buy BTC. I think that's a high probability good play. Not financial advice, of course.
Understood. And I guess one of the things I'm kind of curious about, because you talk about a lot of these quality projects that you've supported on the infamous list, so on and so forth. Is there a reason why you don't talk about a lot of the other coins on the list that you were very, very vocal about?
Yeah, so I'm still supporting all the communities. I'm still talking about a bunch of them. The thing is, though, when I was buying them, that was literally July 2024, right? And my bet was, I know cults will do best, and I don't know which of them will do like the absolute best. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to buy 10 of them. And that's going to be like my own index for the cult thesis, right? Now, since then, some have done better, some have done worse. And some whales of some communities turned out to be more loyal than whales in the other communities. The average member of one community turned out to be much more hardworking than the average member of the other community. So it's an evolving thing. You know what I mean? I'm gonna hold all 10. I haven't touched a single coin until the very end. So I'm loyal. I'm still loyal to all 10 of the coins.
You spoke to like the next 6 months being the most bullish time in crypto. Can you kind of just like expound upon? I think you hit on as part of other questions, but kind of like a direct answer there. What's like driving this conviction for you?
Yeah. So here are some of my assumptions. My assumption one is 2025 is going to be a rough equivalent of 2021 and 2017. Some of the best earners in those cycles were people that positioned in the spring and the summer of that year, right? I think we are in that summer once again. Historically, these like third and fourth year summers have been amazing times to like get involved while the market is going sideways. Historically, volatility and volumes and market participation and social media mentions, they all start climbing higher in August and especially in September as people come back to work, to their desks, to whatever, to their institutional jobs. And all my experience in crypto is pointing to the fact that the next 6-8 months are going to be bullish. I think they're going to be bullish. We can debate whether it's going to be mild bullishness or extreme bullishness. I think it's going to be somewhere in between. But I'm bullish on BTC. Like I've already alluded to, the BTC Treasury company narrative is still in its relative early stages. I think we're gonna see another like 200 companies join the roster. I think like all governments around the world are gonna continue printing money in one form or another, regardless of what alphabet soup they're gonna be naming the mechanisms as. They're gonna be printing money. And this train only goes one way. Nothing stops this train. This is a one road street. So I mean, one way or another, BTC is going to be the beneficiary of this. I do think that BTC is going to drag up a lot of other coins. Trading altcoins, believing in altcoins, holding altcoins has become much harder, but it's become much more of a people's game, in my opinion. That's why I'm so obsessed with loyalty metrics on chain. And essentially, again, like buy where loyalty already is, buy what already has strong momentum, buy where holders are growing week to week, and the probability of you making money will increase.
May I ask you, what drives you in crypto? Like, is it the idea of building a cult? Is it the idea of like flipping the stock market with a coin? Is it making money? Like, what's your sort of main driver within the space?
Believe it or not, I'm not really a materialistically driven person. For the past 10 years, I haven't spent money on anything other than like coffee, rent, and travel. So I'm not really attached to like material belongings, but what I'm driven by is I want to be a part of something big. I want to be a part of something viral. I want to like build a community that is, or contribute towards building a community that's like gonna grow to millions. And I think the biggest thing is, and I think we haven't touched upon this, and I think that's a very interesting topic. Whether it's 2 years or whether it's 9 years, some form of an AGI is coming, which will be better at humans at literally everything. Like I don't think there is going to be a single thing that humans can do better than machines. Not a single thing. Not one. But some things will be disrupted later than others. And I think that the things that will be disrupted the latest, or I think the things that will do well, in order to figure out what they are, you have to ask yourself, like, what problems will the rapid rise of AI cause? And I think we're going to see a spike in unemployment, but I think that will not only evaporate income, But perhaps more importantly, in the context of the Western world, it's going to destroy people's identities, and it's going to destroy like people's like their function, like what they're gonna do, how they're gonna spend time, right? So this kind of ties back to this whole spirituality thesis that I have is which quote unquote financial assets are good or at least decent hedges against the AI rise, which is mathematically inevitable, right? Which assets are going to thrive during this age of technical acceleration, right? And I think it's actually not going to be, that's kind of another answer to your question about cash flow. I think essentially you don't even need AGI. Just like a sufficiently strong, weak AI is going to destroy a lot of cash flow businesses, especially in the open source DeFi context, because most of the code bases are open source, and the cost of like computer code is slowly collapsing to zero, which means that the fees that a lot of the cash flow producing DeFi projects, that the fees that they can charge, I think they're going to, maybe not overnight, but over the next 3-4 years, they're going to grind down. And I think essentially AI is going to disrupt everything technical and everything cash flow much earlier than it can disrupt the spiritual. And that's why I like pure memes, pure belief assets, the pure spiritual, because I think that they're going to do incredibly well in this kind of like AI upheaval, in this AI chaos. And I think essentially SPX6900 is going to be one of the beneficiaries of this like AI destruction, essentially AI disruption. And like that is like one of the 5 trends that I'm thinking about the most. Essentially, how do we survive? Because humans are going to become useless. And as dramatic as that sounds, we need to make peace with that, right? So in order to make peace with that, if you think that if we take the median number of years where experts think AGI is going to come, call it 4 or 5 years, right? We need to think what's going to do well in those 4 or 5 years when unemployment is already going to start trickling down and inflation will continue persisting, right? So I think it needs to be these crazy spiritual assets. That's my bet.
Would you say though you're creating value here or sort of moving value? So for instance, like if you just build up this sort of cult coin and you encourage more people to buy the coin and that's why the money goes up and that's why earlier investors have more money, that's just because other later people have put their money into it. Like how does that really solve against the idea of sort of widespread unemployment where people don't have the salaries? Like does that really like solve the issues or does it sort of only help some people, kind of actually worsens other people off?
I mean, does you have to ask yourself. So the correct answer is a bit of both, but you have to ask yourself, is Bitcoin growing because it's positive sum, or is it also growing because it's absorbing value from gold, real estate, fiat, and bonds? Right? So what is it? And the answer is both, right? It's absorbing value from gold, fiat, real estate, and bonds, but it's also faster and more efficient, and it's growing the pie as well. So I think it's both. And this is the issue. I think a lot of VC types or a lot of skeptical people, cynical people, they think meme coins are just Ponzi's. And they're right about the bottom 99.999% of them. But I think a select few are actually providing people value, whether it's community, connection, like a sense of belonging, a sense of adventure. And we can debate what value that has, but it's definitely not zero. You know what I mean? And essentially, there's millions of people around the world that are paying for social clubs, private memberships, masterminds, golf clubs, spa clubs, ayahuasca retreats, yoga, Pilates, the music festivals, and so on and so forth. And essentially, the best meme coins, they're building a version of that on chain. And I think that can go to billions, hundreds of billions. That's what people don't understand. I actually think it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Most people think it's just like, oh, you're gambling, that's it. But I actually think that like the cult ones, the best hodl ones, they're actually building like the on-chain version of what I've described. Essentially, you know, San Francisco built itself on B2B and B2C companies. But I think what the best meme coins are, they are C2C swarms. You know, they're C2C companies, and that's kind of their beauty.
Amazing. Well, that's all we have for today. I want to thank Murad for joining this episode. And as a reminder, our newsroom works tirelessly to get you accurate, informed crypto news. If you want to stay ahead, read the blog. Thanks. See you next time.